So far in our Add Item to Cart test, we've instructed Nightwatch to open the home page and then click the first item summary. This action should result in the browser then navigating to the item page. It'd be a good idea now to add an assertion confirming that we've landed on the item page. Nightwatch offers a built-in assertion library that can be accessed on the browser object. So after our click method, let's access the assert API and call the URL contains method. The argument for this method is a substring of the URL you want to test. So let's pass in /items/ like that. Before we can continue though, remember that after we click the item summary, there's going to be a short delay while the item view renders. So we're going to need to use the wait for element visible method again. Looking at the item view file, we can see there's an item class on the main structural div. I've made it so that this class is only present on this particular view. So checking for its presence would be a good way of ensuring that the item view is rendered. So let's go ahead and squeeze in a wait for element visible method call above the URL assertion. We'll pass in the CSS selector, item, and we'll again set 5000 as the delay time. With that done, let's run our test suite. Once it completes, you can see in the console that it's passed and that we now have 3 passing assertions, including this one here, testing if the URL contains items. Now the issue with this assertion is that it's not very accurate, because checking that we're on a page with items in the URL could easily give a false positive. For example, we also have the edit page, which has the path items ID edit, and so it would also return true for this particular assertion. Now it'd be better if we could test the full URL rather than just a substring. Now the tricky part to doing this, obviously, is that the full URL contains this dynamic ID. So we're going to have to find a way to get that into a variable so that we can test it. Now the item summary that we're getting the browser to click here, it contains a link, and therefore it's going to have an href value. So we could extract that, and that would give us the full URL that we need. Coming back to our test, before we use the click method, let's use the getAttribute API method. Now this method takes 3 arguments, and the first argument is the element that you want to get an attribute from. In this case, it's going to be the anchor tag within the item summary. So what we can do is copy this CSS selector, and we're going to get the anchor tag that is within the item summary. Now the second argument is the attribute that you want to get. In this case, it's going to be the href. The third argument is a callback that gets past the attribute value, as this is an asynchronous method. So let's declare a variable URL at the top here above the test, and we're not going to initialize it just yet. Then what we'll do is create a callback, and we'll go result, and here we're going to assign a value to URL. So we'll go URL equals result.value like that. Now we can change the URL contains assertion to the URL equals assertion, and then we just pass in URL as the argument. If you try to run this test though, you're going to get the error assertion must implement method property expected. Now I'm going to save you the debugging and tell you what this means. So basically it means that the value of URL that's been passed to URL equals here is undefined. Now to understand why, we need to consider how Nightwatch works. So as you've probably gotten a sense of, each API call runs sequentially after the previous one has finished. If we add a callback, it will also run sequentially, which is great, because it means that our code runs like it reads from top to bottom. However, each method's argument and scope is determined before the test runs at compile time. And since the value of URL is undefined at compile time, so the value of URL passed into URL equals is also undefined. Now, to get around this, Nightwatch has a method called perform, and this allows you to execute code with a runtime context. So all we need to do is insert the perform method call, which we're going to put it here, and we're going to give it a callback. Doesn't need any argument. And what we're going to do is move our assertion into that callback. So we'll actually have to declare the browser object here first, and then we can just paste that assertion there like that. Now, the value of URL is going to be a runtime value instead of the compile time value. If we run the test suite again now, you'll see that this time everything passes, and we're now asserting the complete URL of the item page.